It's really common for me to have riders who come to my training programs that are really comfortable when they leave a paved surface onto an unpaved surface, that they stand up and they can ride standing up. But the first time they get into a really technical situation where we have sand or mud or ruts, they immediately want to drop back down to the seat. This is exactly opposite of what we need to be doing. It's really simple. If you are scared of the situation, or if it's making you nervous, that's the time we stand. If you're perfectly comfortable, then there's nothing wrong with just sitting. And in fact, this brings us to the point, or brings me to the point, that sometimes sitting is the better choice. We don't have to stand up every single time that our paved surface turns into an unpaved surface. Sometimes sitting down on the bike, relaxing, conserving energy is the better choice. But if you're standing up just because you saw it in a picture or you saw it in a video and you were told that was a good thing, but you don't know exactly how you're doing it or why you're doing what you're doing, you might be making things worse. And worse yet, if you stand up when things are easy and then you sit down as soon as they get challenging, you really need to pay attention to this lesson. Something I've heard from both students and other instructors who teach is that when you stand up on the motorcycle, you lower your center of gravity, or you lower your center of mass. And that's just not true. Now, the argument is this: if I'm sitting on the motorcycle and all my weight is on the seat, versus when I stand up and now I'm supporting my weight on the foot pegs, that I've somehow now lowered the center of mass. That's just not true. That's like saying if I'm sitting on the seat or standing on the seat, that it's exactly the same and it doesn't affect the bike any different. The problem is we're mixing the concept of changing the center of mass with becoming sprung weight. When I stand up on the foot pegs, and if I allow the bike to move freely underneath me, what I've done is become sprung weight. It's no different than having a bike with suspension versus a bike without suspension. If you think about it, we have multiple levels of suspension on the bike. The first one is the tires. Not getting into tire pressure, but the idea is that the tires allow flex and absorb. Then the suspension absorbs. And finally, I can absorb. And each level of that helps make the bike perform better and feel lighter. There are 3 benefits to standing, even if you're not doing it well or most effectively. When I stand up, I can see better detail on the terrain. I can see changes in sand or texture. I can see shadows. Vision's always going to be a benefit. When you stand, your chances of injury, if you crash, are decreased. And this is opposite of what many riders believe. They want to sit down because they feel safer. They feel like they're closer to the ground. But the problem is when you're down inside the motorcycle like this and the bike falls, you're much more likely to be trapped underneath the bike, to catch a leg, to get trapped into luggage and have injury. When you're standing, you're basically half ejected when you start. So when the bike falls, you're much more likely to be thrown clear of the wreckage that's about to occur. And the third one is likely the most important, and that is if there's somebody taking pictures or video, you always look better when you're standing up on a motorcycle. As much as I enjoy going through the theoretical and the technical aspects of all this, let me at least go through a simple checklist for you if you haven't been standing off-road or if you just want to check what you're doing. Starting at the bottom, as far as our feet go, you're either going to be on the balls of your feet or center foot hovering over the controls. That depends on the situation. Our knees want to be touching the motorcycle. So I refer to as indexing. I don't want to be squeezing with my lower body. This way I can slide and move wherever I need to go, but I'm always touching. I don't have legs hanging off as I'm trying to balance or anything else. My knees are always rubbing up against the bike. My body's gonna be in a very neutral position. I don't wanna be leaning over on the handlebars. I don't wanna be hanging back on the bikes. And I don't wanna be up in this very high standing position, which is often what people are trying to accomplish when they put risers on. They just want to be standing up like this. If you're in a position where this is okay, then you might as well just sit down and enjoy the ride. So you're going to be slightly forward and bent, a little bit at the knees, a little bit at the hips, a little bit at the elbows and the shoulders. The idea is that you're kind of a spring. You don't want to be stretched out. You don't want to be fully compressed. You just want to be in a position where you can allow things to flex. Our hands, I'm gonna run, I prefer generally a 2-finger setup on my motorcycle. I'm running 2 fingers in 2, but anything less than 4 is fine off-road. You don't want 4 fingers on the levers because the last one, the pinky, or the forefinger on the front, those are for staying in contact with the motorcycle. If the handlebars are suddenly deflected by rocks or change in terrain, you don't want the handlebars pulled out of your hands. So you want to have at least 1 finger hooked around those handlebars and ready to go. And the rest of the time, you're going to be between 1 to 3 fingers up on those controls. My wrists are going to be flat. My chin and my ocular cavities are going to be looking out as far as I can gain information. Now my eyes can move and shift around, but I want my ocular cavity pointed at that farthest point. So each time I relax, my eyes come back up to that higher position. It's okay to look down at sand or rock to see what's going on, so that you can find the positive path, your happy place where you want to go, but you don't want to be focused down here. You don't want your head pointed down here. You want it up nice and high. So this is kind of your neutral starting position, and then that becomes very dynamic and we move as the bike moves. If you're standing on the bike and you're locked into place, you're making things worse, except for the fact that you have better visibility. You can see farther, and that's always a benefit of standing. But if I'm on a hard packed gravel or dirt road and I'm leaning in with the motorcycle, everything's fine and dandy as long as my traction is still good. But at that point, I might as well sit down and bring that center of mass down center to the bike more. When the bike is leaning and I'm inside, it's creating a lever. The point of standing is to allow yourself to move and have greater influence on how we change the effects of our interaction with the motorcycle. When I'm sitting down, I can also move, but I can't move as far as when I'm standing. When I stand, I can make a much, much greater influence on that. Not just left and right, also forward and backward. This means if I'm doing hard braking, I can get down behind that braking force, so I'm not getting weight up onto the handlebars. If I'm accelerating, I'm the one in charge of the throttle. So as I move and accelerate, I can move forward on the bike. But allowing yourself to be able to move around that motorcycle to become that sprung weight, that's what standing is all about. If you have pressure on the handlebars, you're doing it wrong. If you're locked into one position, you're doing it wrong. If you're squeezing tight with the knees and your lower body can't move, you're doing it wrong. You have to be touching the bike, indexed to the bike, but ability to move forward and back without using the handlebars to support all of your weight. That's how we stand effectively as sprung weight. I've been talking about how we influence the motorcycle, how we can move around on it more when we're sprung weight, but we actually need to take this a step in the other direction, meaning it's not about how I influence it in the positive way. Sometimes it's just that we influence it in a very negative way. When we're riding the motorcycle, and I talk about during my classes I teach, we have 3 states of action as a rider. We're proactive, active, or reactive as a rider. And most riders are either active or reactive. Reactive means things have gone bad, you're trying to get back into control. An example of that is if I'm riding on the trail, the bike slips, and I dab and I have to get back up into my balance point, that's a reactive stage. Now, I might have expected it, and that happens, right? That's why we ride motorcycles, because they're fun and they challenge us. Active means I'm dealing with exactly what's happening right now. This is that example of a rider cornering on a motorcycle on a gravel road and leaning in with the bike. Everything's going fine and dandy until that front end slips out, and now they're not ahead of the motorcycle. I need to be proactive. I need to be ahead of whatever is about to happen. Standing allows me to do that, so I am not in the way of the motorcycle. If the motorcycle is about ready to slide to the right, I want to be on the right side of the motorcycle before it starts sliding. Now, it might not happen, but the idea is that I'm in that position, so if it slides towards me, I'm already there. If I'm going to brake hard, I'm thrown forward on the motorcycle. So when I get behind that bike, when I get behind those handlebars, what I'm doing is I'm getting in that position so as I brake hard, I don't end up loading up onto those handlebars and influencing the rake and trail, or causing the bike not to be able to self-correct and then causing it to crash because I'm putting weight on the bars during braking. Same thing under acceleration. If you have a lot of arm pump when you're riding, you're holding on too tight. If you're going up hills and you always feel like you're holding on and you can't get away from the bike, you're not in that neutral position. You're not in a place where you are ahead of the actions that are occurring. Now, often that arm pump comes from a bike that's inappropriately set up. That's very often handlebars with too much sweep, or riders who add risers to a motorcycle, which creates less space for the rider to get more balanced. You know, they don't get their hands as far forward because the bars are coming up and in closer to them and closes up all that space so they're not forward on the bike. But again, that's a whole different video, and I've done a talk about that already. Just as if I've done videos on hand position, foot position, and several other aspects about the standing, I just wanted to get into the concept here of why we stand, and that it's not just about getting up on the motorcycle, that we have to do it in an effective way that is benefiting what our objectives are for the bike. And that's to have more control, meaning that the bike is not out of control and that we're not trying to catch up to it. We want to stay flexible on that. Thanks for watching the channel. I really appreciate it. If you have not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you get any new lessons that are coming up in the future. If you're interested in training with me and my instructors, I am training across the US this year. The schedule for 2025 is already posted. And I'll be training on the East Coast and on the West Coast, so please take a look at that. Also, my international tours next year for 2025 is Nepal and Morocco. Go to the website, Tkacs.com, and you'll find those listed there as well. If you want to support these free online lessons, the Patreon is a great way to do that, or making donations through YouTube. That helps keep this channel alive. That helps me be able to afford the camera equipment and also all of the time and expenses to make this happen. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope these tips help you. And better yet, I hope to see you in the future.